Imagine waking up to a gray dawn in a medieval English village. The air was damp. There's a faint smell of wood smoke, and outside someone's already gathering branches. Because when you're a peasant in the Middle Ages, no one hands you a house. You build it with whatever you can find, whatever the Lord will let you take, and sometimes whatever you can get away with. Almost all the land belongs to someone else. Lords, the church, the crown peasants don't own the ground they live on. If you want to build, you usually need permission. In manorial records, there are real cases where peasants were fined or forced to tear down a cottage because they didn't have approval to build it. Even the waste ground the edges of the Lord's land wasn't free game. And then there's the timber. Good oak or elm is off limits. That's for the manor house or the local mill. If a peasant is caught felling trees, they risk punishment. So people gathered dead wood, snapped off twigs, or cut thin saplings when no one was watching. So let's say your peasant family has a patch of land and just enough wood. The average house? One room, maybe 5 meters long by 3.5 wide. About the size of a modern bedroom. And that's it, no kitchen, no bathroom, no second floor. If you're lucky and doing okay, you might have a second room for storage or sleeping. But most people made do with a single smoky space. Walls were built with a method called Wattle and daub. First, upright stakes were driven into the ground, sometimes just branches, not cut timber. Between them, flexible twigs like hazel or willow were woven to make a kind of loose fence. That's the wattle. Then came the daub. A thick, sticky paste made of mud, straw, maybe animal hair, and manure. It sounds grim, but it worked. Once dried, the daub hardened into solid walls that could last for years, assuming no one poked holes in them. The roof was almost always thatch. After the harvest, leftover straw was bundled up and layered onto a simple frame made of poles. It was tied down in overlapping layers to keep the rain out. Thatched roofs are surprisingly good insulators, but they rot, they leak, and if a single spark from your fire lands on them, well, say goodbye to the house. Speaking of fire, the hearth was at the center of every peasant home. It was used for cooking, heating, and light. But there was no chimney. The smoke just drifted upward, filling the space until it seeped out through the thatch or a hole in the roof. Everything inside walls, roof beams, people got coated in soot. The air was thick and eye-watering, but without it, there was no hot food, no warmth, no protection from the cold. Floors just packed dirt, maybe with rushes or straw scattered on top, which soaked up spills, droppings, and anything else that hit the ground. Some families changed the rushes regularly. Most didn't. Furniture was minimal. A bench or stool, maybe a chest for clothes or tools. If there was a table, it might be just a board laid across barrels or blocks. Beds were piles of straw or rushes, maybe raised slightly off the floor if you had the wood. Everyone slept together, both for warmth and because there was nowhere else to go. Privacy didn't exist. The entire family, sometimes extended family, 2-8, slept and lived in one space. And you often shared it with animals. In winter, the chickens might roost inside. Sheep or a goat could be penned at one end of the room. It wasn't just about convenience, it was survival. Livestock were valuable, and they needed warmth just as much as people. In winter, windier parts of England like Herefordshire peasants sometimes built in stone. Not fancy cut stone, but rough stacks of local rock. These dry stone walls were sturdier and didn't rot like timber, and stone roofs held up better in storms than thatch. But it took more effort, more skill, and more access to materials, so it was less common. There were also regional variations. In the Midlands, wood was plentiful, so wattle and daub stayed popular for longer. In upland areas, stone was used more often, and in some northern villages, peat or turf walls were used when nothing else was available. As time went on, some wealthier peasants, freemen, reeves, or prosperous villeins upgraded. They lived in longhouses, where one end of the building sheltered animals and the other housed the family. These homes might have 2 or even 3 rooms. Some had an upper loft for storage or sleeping. They might use cruck frames, large, curved wooden beams that supported the roof like ribs. And some of these have survived to this day. Still, most medieval peasants lived in huts that weren't meant to last. Every few decades they had to be rebuilt either because of rot, weather, or fire. But the construction was simple enough to repeat, and often the whole village pitched in. Raising a cottage was a communal act. People knew how to do it because they had to. It wasn't a craft. It was survival. Inside those walls, families told stories, cooked porridge, gave birth, nursed the sick, and died. These were homes, however rough, however smoky, and they were built with whatever was at hand: mud, straw, sweat, and a bit of stubborn hope. So next time you walk past a modern house with double glazing and insulation, think about a time when building a home meant borrowing a few poles, mixing up mud and dung, and hoping your thatched roof wouldn't leak too badly before winter. That's how medieval peasants built their homes from scratch, not with blueprints, but with bare hands.